as you talk about, the effect on mental health, the pill being associated with anxiety, with depression. We see the effect that the pill has on gut health, where it's a hugely disrupting factor on the gut microbiome.
Welcome. Today we are joined by the captivating Lenise brothers. Lenise is a multifaceted professional dedicated to helping women get better and easier periods. As a registered nutritionist and certified yoga teacher, she approaches her work holistically, merging her knowledge in nutrition with the healing aspects of yoga. Additionally, Lenise is the author of You Can Have a Better Period and the host of the insightful podcast Period Story. Now, please welcome Lenise.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show.
In your book, you mention that period pain has been normalized in our culture. You emphasize that living with period pain, heavy bleeding, or emotional ups and downs is not necessary. Can you share how you discovered that it's possible to have pain-free and drama-free periods?
Yes, that's such a great question to start with. I think talking about how it's painful and heavy periods have been so normalized in our culture, it really starts with the way that we learn about periods in school. And the way that I learned about it was that it was really normal to have a heavy period. And I also saw it in my family. My mom had terrible periods. My grandmother had terrible periods. And so I thought, well, when my period finally arrived, okay, well, this is what's going to happen to me. And then over the years, I kind of started to do some trial and error because I saw my friends and their periods were just, they would come and go and no drama. That was it. And then I thought, well, what can I do? And I went the kind of standard route first because, I was a teenager. So I spoke to my mom. She took me to the doctor. The doctor wanted to put me on the pill, gave me really strong painkillers. And I didn't really take the pill properly. I just, I was young. I just, I think I was about 15 at the time. And I did take the painkillers. But then in parallel, I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll become vegetarian for a number of reasons, including maybe this will help the period pain. And then, started becoming really interested in nutrition and all of that. And this is over a period of about like 20 years. So this isn't overnight. But finally I got to a place where I was, okay, I have to do this. I have to eat this way. Eventually I started eating meat again because I discovered that being a vegetarian was a complete disaster for my personal health. And then I was working in advertising for a long time, dealing with these really painful periods, like having this really patchwork solution of painkillers and, not drinking coffee at certain times of the month, drinking less, all of these kind of patchwork solution. And I started to think, well, I don't want to work in advertising forever. What else can I do? And then I decided to retrain in nutrition. And when I was studying, our lecturer would say to us, when you have to specialize in something, you can't be all things to all people. And I thought, okay, well, what would be interesting? And at the time, there weren't that many people talking about periods and menstrual health and hormones. So I thought, well, wouldn't that be interesting? And I can bring a lot of my own experience to it. I then got to a place where I realized that I probably had some like mild form of endometriosis, but that got to the place where I was able to manage everything through nutrition, through supplementation, and through lifestyle changes. And it really made me realize that the things that we do every single day can make a really massive difference to our health. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as, I'm not going to do this or I'm not going to do that. It's what you add into those 3 meals that you eat every single day. Those 21 meals that you eat across the week can really make a difference. It's how you move your body throughout the day. It's even things like how you breathe can really make a difference to all aspects of your health, including how you experience your period.
Can you give us a description of what a menstrual cycle is? And why, in your view, is menstrual cycle considered as a key indicator of overall health for women?
Yeah, so menstrual cycle just is really important to have a really clear definition here because what I see a lot is that people tend to confuse their menstrual cycle with their period and they'll talk about, oh, I'm on my cycle when they really mean that they have their period or they're menstruating. So, our menstrual cycle is ideally anywhere between 21 and 35 days long. And it's the day your period starts all the way through to day before your next period starts. And we talk about four phases of the menstrual cycle. When you go to the doctor, allopathic medical practitioners will talk about the follicular and the luteal phases. So they'll split the cycle into two. But when you work with practitioners like me, we tend to split the cycle into four phases: your menstrual phase, then after you finish your period, the follicular phase, then ovulation, and then the luteal phase. So four phases, and there's a lot going on hormonally throughout those four phases. We have estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone. And at the heart of this is ovulation. If we're not ovulating, we're not releasing progesterone, and progesterone is so important for so many different aspects of our health, which we'll come on to later on in our conversation. It is a really nice counterbalance to estrogen. We tend to just think about estrogen when you think about periods and menstrual cycle, but you have to think about these hormones like a seesaw. They counterbalance each other, but the menstrual cycle is one of our vital signs. You know, we have these four different vital signs, but the menstrual cycle and our periods, including ovulation, is the fifth vital sign, and it's a really important indicator as to our current health status.
You do mention a lot these vital signs in your book, and I have to say I knew about the four vital signs, but not that menstrual health, but actually the fifth one. So for those who have not studied nutrition like we have, could you define what a vital sign is and what a good menstrual cycle would look like?
Yeah, so a vital sign is a current indicator of our health status. So you have breath rate, heart rate, blood pressure, and temperature. So when you go to the doctor, whether it's a regular appointment or you go to say like A&E, they will check all of these just to see what's going on with your current health. And this is one of the reasons why doctors, they will ask you about your period and your menstrual cycle. And I know it can be annoying, but it is they your period and your menstrual cycle, including whether or not you're ovulating, is an indicator of your current health status. So if you have a painful period or a really heavy period, that's a sign from your body that something's going on. And I know you might be listening to this and thinking, well, but I was told that those are normal. It's normal to have a painful period. It's really not. Like, we don't normalize other types of pain. You know, if you have an issue with your tooth, that's not normalized. Oh, just live with it. No, you get told, go to the dentist, see what's going on. The same has to be true for period and menstrual pain. There's a really big difference to having, a few twinges, some cramps, feeling a bit tired, to the pain that has been really normalized in our culture, relying on painkillers, relying on these things to get through the day, and just thinking, okay, well, I just have to suck it up. Having a painful period is a sign that something is wrong with our fifth vital sign, our period and our menstrual cycle.
In your book, you mentioned that women experience periods for about 35 to 41 years of their life, which is approximately 450 periods during their menstruating years. And that was a horrifying number for me to realize, what really being a woman means, but it made it so real. Beyond the sheer number of periods, why is it crucial to have regular and healthy periods in relation to the production of estrogen and progesterone?
When we talk about periods, we just think about what's happening physically. So, in terms of the shedding of the lining of the uterus and the kind of physical experience of it. But we have to remember that our periods are part of a hormonal cycle. So the menstrual cycle, a hormonal cycle. And when we get our period, we have this hormone estrogen, and estrogen is at its lowest point when we're menstruating. And estrogen is an important hormone because it's not only important for the thickening of the lining of the uterus, so this is what we shed during menstruation, but it's important for so many different other aspects of our health. So the health of our brain, our bones, our bladder, the vagina, our mental health. We have all of these, what we call estrogen receptors, all over our body. So you think of a receptor almost like and the hormone akin to a lock and a key. So the receptor is the lock, and the hormone, in this case estrogen, is the key. And we have all of these different receptors all over our body for estrogen. So when estrogen levels are low, we can feel it, especially in our mental health, because estrogen is also connected with what we call neurotransmitters, so brain chemicals that are important for mental health, mood, and cognition. So dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine. And this is actually really interesting, just to digress slightly, for people with ADHD, because you'll notice that if you have ADHD, which is a condition significantly affected by serotonin and dopamine, that you tend to feel better after you finish your period. And this is because estrogen levels are rising. And as estrogen levels rise, so does serotonin and so does dopamine. And that affects so many aspects of not only our mood, cognitive function. So you can feel a little bit more locked in and more able to focus. Whereas if you have ADHD, you might actually feel not as great as you move towards the end of your menstrual cycle. So, say like a week to 10 days before your next period starts, because estrogen is naturally declining at this point. If you haven't got pregnant, then estrogen will naturally decline in preparation for you to start your next period or start the next menstrual cycle. As estrogen declines, so do these neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine. But then to go back to the other part of this kind of seesaw that I described earlier, progesterone. Progesterone is a counterbalance to estrogen. In the first half of our cycle, estrogen is much more significant. In the second half of our menstrual cycle, progesterone is much more significant. But we have to ovulate in order to make progesterone. And progesterone is kind of from a reproductive perspective, progesterone is important because it helps us maintain the pregnancy. But it's also, as with estrogen, important for other aspects of our health. It's important for mood. So I mentioned some neurotransmitters, brain chemicals earlier. Another important neurotransmitter is GABA. Progesterone connects with GABA in the brain, which is like nature's anti-anxiety. So nature's Xanax. And so this is why as progesterone levels are rising, you naturally feel calmer. It's really important for sleep. It's really important for the health of our blood vessels, the health of our bones. So when we release these hormones every single menstrual month, so I say menstrual month, so it depends on the length of your menstrual cycle, we're making a long-term contribution to our overall health. So estrogen is so important for bone health. And so being able to release estrogen every month in this cycle has a significant effect on our bone health. And this is important for women because we know that after you finish menstruating, so you're on the other side of menopause, you're at greater risk for things like osteoporosis because estrogen is so important for the health of the bone. And we just have less of it and a less potent type of estrogen in our systems.
You raise a very important point that it's important to have periods not just for procreation, but also for our own hormonal health. And it's important for women of any age to have the best period ever because it produces hormones that we need, especially in perimenopause when it's kind of difficult to have that steady hormones. It's even more important, I think, than ever.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I think perimenopause is so interesting because even though it's such a big of conversation these days, there's still a lot of myths that are kind of being thrown around about what's going on hormonally. And I've read, read people talk about perimenopause as a time of estrogen deficiency, and we need to rebrand perimenopause and menopause as a condition of estrogen deficiency, which actually couldn't be further from the truth. If you think about what's going on hormonally at this time, it's a time of massive estrogen fluctuation. Um, and that's where some of us might experience some of these symptoms of hot flashes or mood swings or night sweats. But having the set the groundwork in the years before of laying these deposits of these hormonal deposits will actually be beneficial for us as we go through perimenopause because we have that bone strength to fall back on. We've had the effect of estrogen and progesterone on our brains.
I so agree with you on that. I guess
Yeah.
we've got the same background in terms of
Yeah.
education. But yeah, I know this doctor who just keeps saying that perimenopause is estrogen deficiency. I think on one hand, she just wants to push for HRT, which I know some women will need HRT. But on the other hand, she just doesn't acknowledge that there is some work to be done. And we can, I mean, I'm 49, I'm in the middle of perimenopause. I have no symptom whatsoever, but I've worked so hard on having healthy hormones. And it doesn't mean that I eat perfectly, although at the moment, this month, I do eat perfectly. But in the past, I've had like, lots of sugar and lots of stuff, but I know my body enough to know what works and what doesn't work for me.
That's so interesting because I'm 44. I'm turning 45 this year, and I'm starting to experience the symptoms of some of the symptoms of perimenopause, shorter menstrual cycles, changes to my period. Sometimes I get night sweats. I keep waiting for this thing to hit me, and I need to change my mindset around that because it's not I do all of these different things to manage my health, take these different supplements to get myself into a place where if one as things do continue to change hormonally, I'll be able to handle it and it won't be just this thing that hits me like a tidal wave.
I was exactly like you, actually. Um, I mean, I got my son when I was 41, and I started having weird stuff happening to me right after the son. And I thought, okay, it's a result of pregnancy, like postpartum. And then I realized, hang on a minute. I knew about perimenopause, but always felt I was too young for that. And yeah, I had some kind of night sweat sometime. I had like massively dry eyes for no reason. I had anxiety. And when I pulled all these three symptoms that I never had in the past, like, okay, that's perimenopause, let's see what I can do. And actually, I managed to deal with that completely holistically with just like nutrition and changing a few lifestyle stuff. And I've never had to go to the doctor. I managed all that. And it's because I believe that our body is able to deal with it if we allow that to happen. But yeah, I'm always like you're saying, when is it going to hit me? And I feel like, because 51 is the average age of menopause, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like a year and a half away. And maybe, I'll be good. I don't know. And then I heard someone say, oh, yeah, I was good until the age of 52 and then it all came. But I think the question is just to be yeah, to do the best we can and then see, but not expect for the worst, because the media are really good to portray perimenopause and menopause like hell, and it can
Mm.
be. But for anyone looking after their own health and making effort, I think we are a lot more aware and sensitive and listening to our body, and it is less likely to happen. I mean, I don't know if you have other nutrition therapist friends, but for me, I've asked, who is doing what. And I was very surprised to find out that actually not, I mean, a lot of them are managing without any medication, just by supplements and lifestyle, just like me. So it's like it is possible. We just need to get into it and do whatever needs to be done.
There's actually a really interesting article in the Times today, which talks about how all of these celebrity campaigns around menopause, whilst they have done a good job in terms of raising awareness of menopause and perimenopause, they've actually created this really negative perception around it by just focusing on the symptomology and not and rather than this is a natural phase of life. And there was a research paper that they refer to in this piece. It's such an important and interesting read, and they name check some of the big celebrities in it and some of the doctors in it. And I will be so intrigued to see how they respond to this.
I was not aware. Now I'm going to look at it. But
Yeah,
what I found about celebrities is great that they're sharing their experience, but often they have a product to sell at the end,
yeah,
which is exactly dealing with, I mean, that makes sense. You know, you've got an issue, you find a solution, and then you want to share. But
yeah,
often that's a bit too much.
yeah,
And it's a shame. But yeah, I think we need more women like us, you know, who can, we don't have anything to sell apart from, you know, it is possible, or services. And okay, so I think enough about perimenopause and menopause, and now let's delve into contraception,
yeah.
and more specifically the oral contraceptive pill, also called the pill. While the pill has its positive, such as preventing pregnancy, which is usually the first reason why it was created, but also regulating acne or cycles. Can you share the perspective on the negatives associating with using the pill?
This is such an interesting question because it seems like more and more there are studies that are coming out that are talking about the negatives, as you talk about the effect on mental health. You know, the pill being associated with anxiety, with depression. We see the effect that the pill has on gut health, where it's a hugely disrupting factor on the gut microbiome. We also see the effect that the pill has when women come off of it. So I don't know about you in your clinic, but I've had women come to me, and they've been on the pill for years, and they've have a really hard time coming back to regular periods, regular menstrual cycle. Fertility is something that can be challenging because you've had all of these years. So I've worked with clients who've been on the pill for 20 years. You know, if you've on a pill that suppresses ovulation, because that's the action of the pill to stop the body from ovulating, then you're also not releasing progesterone, which, as we talked about earlier, is so important for so many different aspects of our health. So then coming off of that and having to take the time to rebuild the menstrual cycle, to rebuild ovulation. You know, it isn't something that just starts straight away. And I think that's what women don't understand. They think, oh, I'll come off the pill, my period, a proper period, not a withdrawal bleed, which happens on the pill, a proper period, and will start pretty quick. I'll start ovulating pretty quickly. And that's not always the case. You know, it can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months for everything to restart. But that's if you're giving your body what it needs. Because what we also know is that the pill depletes key nutrients that are important for menstruation, for ovulation. So, zinc, B vitamins, vitamin C, magnesium, selenium, folate, vitamin E. So, folate, you know, that's also really important for pregnancy and conception. And if you're going into this with a depleted status, that's going to have a negative effect on the pregnancy unless you're supplementing properly. There's a lot of, yes, the pill can be beneficial, but there's this kind of always this thing that you have to say when you talk about the pill. Like, yes, it's been beneficial in that women can go to work. We don't have to worry about getting pregnant. But the pill doesn't regulate your menstrual cycle. It just suppresses everything. It suppresses the symptom. You come off of the pill, you still have to address the symptoms that made you go on it in the first place. If you weren't going on it for contraception, you're going on the pill because you've had acne. With some pills, the pill can have an androgenic effect afterwards, where you have women who experience something called post pill PCOS, where they have higher levels of androgen. And it gives a kind of PCOS like effect in the body where you have more acne, you have oily skin, the facial hair, the male pattern baldness. The pill, as I say, while being beneficial kind of on a societal level, is not, I don't think the side effects are discussed enough, and doctors are just prescribing it to, frankly, young girls. You're 13, 14, 15, going on the pill. You haven't properly established menstruation, you haven't properly established ovulation, you're not properly releasing estrogen, progesterone. You're going on the pill, you're suppressing progesterone production for years and years. What is the long term effect of that? And that's something that we don't necessarily know. We can make kind of links where we can see, well, progesterone is really important for mental health. There's issues around mental health with the pill. And afterwards, can we start making proper links? Can we start doing these studies? We have to talk about the pill and contraception with a really wide-eyed, open-eyed view, looking at the benefits, but also looking at the side effects, because it's not a cure-all. There are a lot of negatives that impact women in really significant ways.
On a personal level, I did take the pill for a long time because my mother said, it would be a good thing not to get pregnant while I was younger. And so I took it for over 10 years. And then one day I decided to stop because I didn't have any partner and I wanted to clean my diet and everything. And I remember I didn't have any problem with getting my period back and so on. But the change that I remember the most is that my mental health, I didn't change anything but just not taking this pill, and the mental health were like so much better in a matter of weeks or months. And I was like, what's going on? I was supposed to take someone to help me, and actually all these years of misery was because, and I was like so shocked. And then, yeah, while studying nutrition, I learned about these nutritional deficiencies that medication can trigger. And then the pill, as you mentioned, had so many potential deficiencies. And when you think that women, they take that for years or decades, and
Hmm.
nobody tell them, doctors, GPs, they will never mention that because obviously they don't believe in that. And I read articles, I think it was last year or the year before, that there is a potential carcinogenic effect. Have
Yeah.
you read that as well?
Yes. Yes, I have. Yeah. And these aren't really things that are discussed. They're just kind of, I don't want to see they prescribed like candy, but it just feels like the pill is prescribed without a proper discussion of how long you should be on it, the effects that it's going to have on the body, but also from a contraceptive point of view. If we understand that actually your fertile window is only about 6, maybe 7 days, you can't get pregnant every day of the menstrual month. And it's so fascinating to talk about this because so many people don't know this. I have a TikTok page where I talk about all of these different topics. And whenever I talk about the fertile window, the comments that I get, this isn't true. Why didn't we learn this in school? Why am I on the pill? Why am I taking Depo-Provera injection when I can only get pregnant, these in this short window every month? If we understand that better, I just wonder if we would have different conversations around using the pill for contraception and the age that we start using the pill. It's just something that I just think is really interesting to think about.
I think at school we should learn what is useful, and learning about contraception, the human body, and menopause, perimenopause. And that's so essential, it's important, not just for us women, but for men as well, or boys, to understand, what's going on with their moms or sisters or partners. And it's just, I still don't understand why there is not much being done on this. It would make everyone's life easier, our own life, but also the GP's life, because I'd like to move on to alcohol, because there is a notion that moderate consumption of certain alcohols can be beneficial for health. Do you believe this holds true when it comes to the menstrual cycle?
I actually don't think that alcohol is healthy. And there's this, people talk about resveratrol, this antioxidant that you get when you have red wine. But to be honest, you can, if you eat some grapes, some green grapes or red grapes, you can get that. You can take that as a supplement. You don't need to drink wine to get this antioxidant. To be perfectly frank, I think that alcohol can be a real disaster for women's health in this country. So in the UK, we have this massive drinking culture where it's present at all types of celebration, is present at all points of our lives. So like, oh, where do you want to meet? Oh, the pub. Or, let's go to this bar, or, alcohol is everywhere. And even in the way it's marketed to women, relax, wine o'clock, you deserve a break, mommy needs her wine, when the reality is that alcohol has such a negative effect on women's hormones. We process it through our liver, and we have this compound called alcohol dehydrogenase, and that helps us break down alcohol in the liver. But that compound, the levels of that compound deplete as we get older. So that's why we can feel the effects of alcohol more significantly as we get older. But then talking about the liver is so important for hormonal health. It's where we break down hormones like estrogen and progesterone when our body has used them. But if you're drinking alcohol regularly, then the body wants to get rid of that as quickly as possible. So, the World Health Organization has classified alcohol as a group 1 carcinogen, and has said that there's no safe level of alcohol consumption for our health. And, people will be listening to this thinking like, oh, you're such a killjoy. I like having a little drink will be fine. It's really about, again, having the facts and knowing that this can have an effect on your health. And if you're dealing with premenstrual issues, if you're dealing with a heavy period or a painful period, then having a really clear-eyed look at how much alcohol you're consuming is really important, because of the effect of alcohol on our liver and what we need for it to do for us hormonally. Because these days we ask a lot of our liver, we look the pesticides in our foods, all of the kind of xenoestrogen, so synthetic estrogens in our personal care, our cleaning products, in fragrance, all of that gets processed through the liver. And so if you're then adding alcohol in the mix, it can be a real disaster for your hormones. So it's something that, if you're listening to this or you're watching this and you're thinking like, I do need to kind of have a look at this, I would really encourage you to think about a more mindful approach to drinking, being really aware of how often you drink and how much you drink. Because if you have any sort of menstrual or hormone health issues, alcohol could be contributing to them.
So agree with you. If you have any kind of health condition and you want to do something about it and resolve it, I think cutting alcohol is definitely the number one step
Yeah.
by far. And then I guess without being as hard, perhaps you can try to reintroduce alcohol after a while, or just to stay positive. I think it's possible to have like one glass once in a while, part of a meal, which means that you would have all the other nutrients that help the liver detox, because we need protein and a lot of nutrients to detox. So if your liver is as optimal as possible in terms of function, then possibly it could be fine if you don't if you drink sufficient water as well. I mean, there are. It's a question about what you want. If you really want to sort out your health issues, then yes, stop alcohol and then find a way. In your book, you mentioned that pain is a sign that something isn't right. Can you tell us why we experience painful periods?
We talk about them in two different ways. So when you have a period that is, as quote on, just say this in quotes, like just, it's just a painful period. We call that what primary dysmenorrhea. So if you go to your doctor and you say my period is really painful, they might write something like primary dysmenorrhea in your notes, and that means that there's the presence of a painful period without it being part of another condition. And so typically, when you have a period that's really painful, it's a sign of chronic inflammation where the immune system is responding as though there's a continual threat. And you have higher levels of these hormone like compounds called prostaglandins. And prostaglandins are really important. They are what they make help the uterus kind of make this contraction motion in order to shed the lining of the uterus, but you have too many of a certain type, and that can make the period more painful. But then, if you have something called secondary dysmenorrhea, it's period pain as a part of another condition. So it could be endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, pelvic inflammatory disease. And that's where you have this other condition, and a painful period is one of the symptoms of this condition. So that's some of the reasons why we experience painful periods. And if you're currently kind of trying to figure out what's going on with your body, it's really important that when you speak to your doctor or healthcare practitioner, you go in with at least 3 months worth of information where you're able to say, okay, my period is this many days long. It's this heavy, so I need to use this many products every day. I need to change them this often. And the pain that I experience, you give it a rating, but you also talk about the quality of the pain. So it feels like this. It's sharp, it's burning, it lasts this amount of time. So it's constant or it's intermittent, and in this part of my body. Because when we talk about conditions like endometriosis, for example, we're also looking at where the pain is. So typically, when you have period pain, you might experience it in your abdomen, maybe in your back, in your lower back. But when we have endometriosis, we're looking at also pain in the legs, pain in the pelvis. You might have pain in the kind of chest cavity, in the lungs, in the diaphragm, because these endometrial lesions can be in other parts of the body. So having a really clear vocabulary of your experience over 3 months is really important, because that gives you information to help figure out what's going on, if it's a kind of primary dysmenorrhea or secondary dysmenorrhea.
And if a woman successfully brings their periods under control, is there any reason why sometimes they would experience painful periods again in midlife, as in going through perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah, so that's such an interesting question, because you think, oh yeah, I've got my period under control. You're kind of in your late 30s, in your 30s, and then all of a sudden, early 40s, mid 40s, things start to change. We have to look at what's going on during this time of our lives. So perimenopause is a time of great hormonal fluctuation where estrogen is fluctuating so rapidly. And then also you get into the situation where you don't always ovulate every menstrual cycle anymore. With no ovulation, you don't experience that kind of calming anti-inflammatory release of progesterone, which is so helpful if you have a really painful period. So this is where in perimenopause we can see some of these symptoms that we thought we had calmed down in our 20s and our 30s return. And then also thinking about what's going on personally during perimenopause, where you're in your 40s, you've got a lot of things going on from a work perspective in your personal life. Maybe you're dealing with aging parents. There's just a lot going on. And our menstrual cycles, our periods, ovulation, they're so stress sensitive, and any changes in your stress levels can impact your period and your experience of the period.
And with this discussion, I hope people realize there is a lot we can do. And if someone realizes that actually they want to do something about their periods, what would be the best piece of advice? As in, where should they start, and how long would it take to typically see any improvements?
So, food is a really great place to start because, as I said earlier, if we're eating 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, that's 21 different opportunities to add in foods that can make a positive impact on your period and on your experience of ovulation. So the way that I work with my clients is very much about what we're adding in rather than focusing on subtraction. So thinking about what you can add into your meals. And I like to use a kind of tick list to help my clients when they're looking at how they should add what they should add in. So are you eating enough protein? Are you eating enough fiber? Are you eating enough fat? Are you eating enough greens? So all of those four elements, if you're adding those in to each meal, can have a really positive effect on your experience of your period. We need protein to make certain hormones that are important for our menstrual cycle. Each hormones like estrogen and progesterone, they're steroid hormones, so they're made from fat. We need to have fat in our diet in order to make these hormones. Fiber is so important. So the fiber that you get from fruit, vegetables, rice, pulses, nuts, seeds is so important for our gut health. And we haven't talked about this really, but our gut is really important for managing estrogen levels. And when those are in balance, that will have a positive effect on your experience of your period and your menstrual cycle. And finally, greens. So even if you're looking at eating more grains like broccoli, like cauliflower, like kale. I know kale is such a cliche, but it has so many beneficial nutrients and compounds for our hormone and menstrual health. So just starting with one meal, and then so you're starting with your breakfast and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to add more protein. I'm going to add more fat, maybe add more greens or fiber, depending on the type of breakfast that you have. So I like savory breakfast. I think that's a great way to start the day. So omelets or eggs on toast, maybe add a bit of kimchi or sauerkraut to that. But if you're a porridge person, you've got the fiber and the porridge. You make the porridge with milk. That's where you get some of your fats. Maybe you throw on some berries, some fresh berries. Maybe you throw on some sort of nut butter. And you don't have your greens, but as long as you're covering off in your other two meals, it's fine. So just focusing on one meal and then building from there.
I want to remind also people about your great book, You Can Have a Better Period. Honestly, I really enjoyed it, and I wish I had that when I started having periods, or when I was in great pain and I didn't know where to start, because that's so well explained. Gets a bit technical at some point, I have to
Yeah.
say, but that's normal, because I think this book is for everyone, from those who are just willing to find solutions, but also for practitioners who wants to understand more things. I did learn a thing or two, which was great, actually. So thank you so much. So now, throughout your personal journey, helping so many women, but also, I guess, inspiring also so many other practitioners, what has been the most rewarding part?
I think the one of the most rewarding things is when I have clients who come to me at the end of our time working together. So I typically work with my clients over 3 months, and we focus on what we're adding in, and they say to me, "This feels really easy. I know exactly what to do, and I see the impacts on my health." And then when they come back to me, say 6 months, a year later, just for an update, because sometimes I clients they just like to update me on what's going on. They say, "I'm still doing what we talked about. It feels so easy." I love that because I don't want this to feel complicated. I want it to feel like something that's easy to integrate in my clients' lives. And then the other side of it is knowing that I can help a wide range of women. So I have women who come to me and they work with me on a one-to-one basis, but not everyone can afford that. So knowing that I help people through my book, and then also through my Instagram and my TikTok pages, where I just try to offer a lot of information in a really easy to understand way. And if they take, a few things out of that that helps them, then fantastic. I really love that.
That's my next and last question, actually. For those who would like to connect with you, what is the best way to reach out? You've mentioned Instagram and TikTok. Can you give us our handles?
Yeah, so on Instagram and TikTok, it's at Eat Love Move. And then my website is www.eatlovemove.com. You can drop me a message. I work with women on a one-to-one basis over 12 weeks. So I'm always available for a chat.
Thank you so much, Lenise, for this fascinating chat, sharing your expertise and experience with us today. Thank you to our listeners. If you've enjoyed this interview, perhaps you will enjoy this one or that one. And if you found it useful, please like this video and leave a comment with your questions and thoughts. Have you also considered to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest interview? Until next time, eat well!